I have a question.
Yes.
Can
go
you
ahead.
replace here process by service, or would
Everything
it change? Would it change the picture?
Not at all. I can add my 3 architectures that you saw earlier.
Okay.
It's the same premise on all 3 architectures.
So then from my point of view, because we would like to achieve the same level and quality of service, it should be on the controlled side.
Okay, then you have to define how controlled, right? Is it totally standardized or is allowable variance?
Allow variance.
And I wonder if
Okay.
the answer, Troy, is the approach to this would be a phased approach from do your own thing to ultimately being standardized, but getting from the far right to the far left in one step might be difficult, right? Maybe you're gonna need center of excellence type documentation to get to standardization. You're gonna need controlled execution to get to standardization. So is it a step by step, line upon line approach to getting to the left?
Possibly, but I'm going to ask you not to think about all things marching hard left ever. Your SDLC may be center of excellence forever. Your portfolio might be on the right. Your incident, your change, your information security approach is on the left. So you place a process in desire of consistent standardization intentionally somewhere, but not all on the left. That actually is not beneficial to your organization. While you reduce variability, risk, cost, increase speed, you kill your innovation. So
Right.
some things I want to leave on purpose in craft versus utility onto the left.
I think it's always this nice answer. It depends. So it depends on the service, on the individual.
Yes.
What do you want
But
to
go look through the lens of this discussion. It really doesn't depend based on logic. If I get strategic, if I'm innovating for the purpose of finding the next big thing, these are systems of partnership. I'll work with partners, multiple partners to see, innovation, throw a lot of darts at the wall. Only a few darts will actually come home, right? As soon as I actually find a dart that makes sense, I don't leave it in the hand of a partner. I move it to the right, right? And now I allow it to be variable as long as it's making me money and it's a strategic differentiating. But now it becomes ubiquitous. All my other competitors have it. Leaving in that quadrant is irresponsible. I have to bring it down to this quadrant. And then I have to eventually get rid of it. So it really doesn't depend on what they like and don't like, or what they feel and don't feel. These are logic-based arguments where you need to leave it.
So may I have one question?
Sure, absolutely.
Yes. The last slide, so you mentioned about the process or about the process. Yes. So yes. On this definitions or the process is about the entirely the operational process. I mean, the current definition of the process on this part.
Pick your pick. All of these can be plotted on this picture.
To formulate these kind of, okay.
What I'm describing is you have to decide, these are all organizational capabilities that exist in Konica Minolta today. Not one of them is not there. You don't choose whether they exist or not, only whether you want to put them under intentional governance and management, and then where you want them to be in respect to consistent, coherent practice across your structure. So these dialogues can be applied to process. ITIL calls them practices now, by the way, because it's a bigger thing than a process. It can be applied to product or service or technology architecture. We go back and forth, but the same thing applies. What is your desire for consistency? Plug each one on the graph.
Yeah, because the background is you mentioned about the structure of global governance team or something.
If you want to hold anything of these capabilities consistent, you're going to need a governance structure
Yes, this
that
right.
does that. Now, we're still going to build on this discussion, but we're building slowly. The SMO will be a capability that chairs this team and maybe has some ownership responsibilities, but not all. Specifically, the ownership areas underpinning the whole value chain and the enabling and improving side.
I see. So, okay, I understand. So, Shinya, just internal questions. After Christian Nobel left Konica Minolta, after that, so that we are missing these kind of the activities. That is my understanding. Am I right? Or someone inside the PMO team is taking over these kind of activities?
PMOs are temporary projects.
Yeah, he was working on process governance within productization, so not the whole business unit operation.
I see.
Yeah.
Absolutely different. Now Troy is explaining.
Right.
Okay.
What's being discussed now is a bit different, broader.
Yeah, more broader than what he did in the past. Okay.
Now, one thing I want to describe, though, guys, is again, let me give you a case scenario. Again, this global manufacturing organization I've mentioned a couple of times, they had done some improvement around what I will call their factory, which is what this is, their value streams and processes. They had done some improvement around standard infrastructure, but they hadn't done their product and service model and ownership model. So they began that journey. I worked with them 4 years ago. I came back and found them still focusing on this. They had completely let all of this go. That was doomed. You can't actually achieve this without this consistent factory in place. And depending on how broad you see this, your organizational structures will be impacted and your partner and supplier relationships will also be different. You see, a service organization understands it has 3 core architectures. A technology organization has 3 core architectures, but only focuses on one. Intentionally. That's like playing a game of cards with only 1/3 of the deck and think you're going to win. Because these exist whether you want to look at them or not, or aware of them or not. You don't choose whether they exist, only whether you define, discover, and then govern and manage them. And that will impact how you structure and how you partner. Okay.
Can we go back to the slide? Yep, that one. You probably were going back there anyway. I don't want you to repeat the whole thing, but one more time with just for my benefit and maybe others on the call.
Yeah. So the slide is called Scaled and Federated Process Ownership, because I am trying to go for a federated approach to keeping process consistent across structure. It's not centralized, it's not decentralized, it's federated. I have a Senate.
What deal with that? I mean, what size organization would benefit most from this? I mean, I see on here the word enterprise, What does that mean to you, and at what point should a company consider this type of scale?
It sounds funny, but pretty much after you get past a 20-person shop, you're going to need to do something like this. Some things are kept consistent. The moment, see, process issues don't arise until you get to a certain size. There's a reason lean startup is, let's go back to our lean and small medium company roots. Because when you had 10 people all doing the same thing, there wasn't a problem with consistency and collaboration and shared outcomes. And it's only when we get to a certain size when we focus on the silo versus the system. The moment you begin to be siloed versus we the people, you need governance to basically keep consistency.
So I really like the word federated, especially the way you've got it outlined here. And everything that I see on the left and right are exactly what we hear all the time, right? Decentralized IT, we know is higher cost. And in the case of our business, whether it's a market in the United States or an operating company in Europe, there are higher costs associated with delivering that decentralized IT because they want a certain standard or a certain level of quality that they don't feel like they're getting from what we call the centralized IT, which is very oftentimes accused of being unresponsive, right? So Shinya, we're constantly talking about this end-to-end service level management process. And the reason for that is we're accused of being unresponsive and unable to meet the needs of the decentralized business. There is limited business ownership or control. And oftentimes we hear that centralized solutions don't meet business needs because we're not close enough to the client. Where the federated combines the best of both worlds together to create a governed, more profitable, more strategic model for delivering IT services.
And now we have a Senate that defines what the Roman roads are going to be across the empire. Common road system, common military, common legal system, but local variability where the benefit is to the empire / enterprise. It's a republic.
Yeah, right. It's a republic, exactly.
But you don't need also the governance for that?
It is a governance structure in its own right. That's why we have systems of parliament and or Senate, right? And representatives from various councils or from various states or different domains. The Senate is made up of membership from the various constituent parts of my organization. Welcome to the scaled process organization. It's no different than how we run the governments of our countries when it's working as a republic, not when it's a political mess. And partisanship is more important than transcendent purpose.
So one more time with feeling, go through this slide.
We need, if you have a desire to keep anything consistent, take the word process off if you'd like. A technology platform, a product or service, a process. You want to scale that across structure. You have to have a definition of what standard is. That definition has to be agreed from representatives of the various countries or areas and still has to be owned by an individual. As a group, they agree what good looks like and what definition of control is, whether we want loose control, something in the middle, or standard. We can talk about that as another decision of this council here, because it's a process specific, a product service specific council. We then, as agreement, once we figure out what it is, how we're going to define it, what the success measures are for it, how we're going to, report on it, each individual local process manager / small p process owner or local country product owner, again, translate as you will, is responsible for deploying the agreed approach locally into their organization. And to measure it the same way in consistency, right? If any one of these individuals has an idea for improvement, they bring it up to the team, which we have complementary skills with shared accountability for which we hold each other mutually accountable. If there's an idea that is looked at as a positive thing for this one product or service or one process, that's cool. This individual, who's the global / overall process owner, has to bring it to their peers up here into this council, because now we're in a linked up framework of products and services, part of a portfolio, and or linked up framework of processes, part of an IT service management framework, an operating model. And that has to then be deemed to be positive for the all of us, because it needs to be looked at from a systemic approach. So they operate under, there's a change advisory board for anything of a potentially globally impacting impact. You know, they don't have to necessarily see all changes go that level, but things which have a potential to impact framework, yes. They are creating a dashboard of all your products and services, but they're fed from this individual process or product or service, which is also fed locally. So I have local measure to global measure. This global thing is in a global dashboard of other things. That global measurement dashboard allows me to know whether I am or not delivering on value according to my critical success factors and KPIs. That allows me to report to my executive committee what good looks like and if I'm achieving it or not. And also builds a business case where I'm going to need the next evolution of major improvement. And this council here would create that business case. They would also hold their peers accountable to close gaps down here, which is mutually accountable. Okay, now, overall, there has to be someone at the top saying, make it so. This is how we, the people, act, work, and behave. And so there has to be an executive with enough purview and political influence and power to ensure that they're creating systems thinking and constancy of purpose. By the way, this is a key lean leadership principle. Lean leaders create systems thinking and constancy of purpose. Let me just demonstrate.
Question to SPI team, is this process ownership part of your responsibility, the global one, or not?
It should be.
Should be.
It should be. One of the questions I was going to ask Troy was, just to make sure I'm clear, those processes, you know, ITIL v3 in v3 2011 have a long list, and I don't remember how many there are, but there's a long list of processes. But in v4, I think processes are gone, right?
Let me clarify that. I will answer that question in 30 seconds.
Okay.
This is the Shingo Institute's Shingo House of Lean Principles. To gain organizational results, leadership must create enterprise alignment. That means they create systems thinking. How big is your us? And then in the context of that system, a constancy of purpose and approach. If you want shared results, you have to have shared goals and outcomes. Okay. So this is Taiichi Ohno, basically coming back at this, and it's only happening through process and continual improvement and a culture that actually cares about that. Okay. There's nothing new here. Now, to answer your question, the language of taxonomy. So in ITIL version 3 and previous versions of ITIL, we called things processes. But a process, by definition, is a very linear, algorithmic, repeatable thing. Many things in ITIL were not processes, by that definition. Catalog management is not a process. Service level management is not a process. There are many things. Availability management is not a process. So we had to come up, you know, and some of these things had multiple processes, like ITIL financial management had accounts receivable, accounts payable, expense reimbursement. So many of these things had multiple processes. So the word process was not a correct word to use. And so in ITIL 4, a cleanup of this language has happened. So the word practice was used. because it has relevance in the DevOps and the Agile community, they talk about technical practice, things we must be good at. It also supports capability, which is the concept of organizational capability to be good at. And so in ITIL 4, there's a taxonomy of language. We talk about a service value system. I haven't shown you that picture yet, by the way. Underneath the service value system, we have a service value chain. The service value chain, which is a set of activities performing value in the form of products and services, is underpinned by 34 IT management practices. Welcome to them right there in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
These IT management practices may have processes as one of their resources. These processes can be documented in procedures. And some procedures are even more detailed, standard operating procedure. So you have a taxonomy of language where process is still here, but that's a smaller word than practice. And just to give you a little bit of insight why we went with the word practice, it came down to a global translation issue. In the words Spanish, we didn't translate capability well, and so with that problem and the desire to align language with the DevOps and Agile community, the word practice was chosen to describe organizational capabilities, which is what you see here. Every time ITIL iterates, it gets bigger. Why? The map keeps getting larger. Because when Columbus discovers a new world, what changed? Not the world, the map did.
So go back to the other slide now that shows the process.
This governance approach. Yeah, and we're going to build from here, by the way. We're not done our story. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. So that where it says process owner, Shinya, you had asked, do we have and are we responsible for process owner? That includes things like, as an example, incident management, change management, availability management, service design, portfolio management. Those are all practices, right?
This is the new language. I hadn't updated it. My apologies, folks.
So, but
Yeah,
here
no, I
could
just
you
wanted
also
to
replace
confirm-
it by service?
Yes, you can, because everything we keep talking about
Because, yes, it's all the
applies
three.
to all three architectures.
So then actually, and also in the Word, you explained it, the other slide was exactly what we, I think, already also discussed and think that this is a good way it could be. The question is, or my question would be for myself, how to go there, how to reach that within our organization.
Yeah. So the service management office is one way, because what happens is the emergence of this ownership discussion, distributed doesn't work. This is starting to get buy-in. It creates consistency, but it's too narrow. I see then SMOs typically evolve even further to help with training and development, learning and development, continual improvement. They start to be able to run Kaizen events. So they pick up lean skills and value stream mapping. Certain process ownership actually moves here, but not all process ownership, like relationship management as a process ownership, right? Or I use the word process practice interchangeably. I'm still programming my language after 20 years, right? Portfolio doesn't typically or necessarily get owned in this office, but they may want to help the organization develop a common, consistent portfolio approach and ensure the owners and the roles responsible have the skills and knowledge and templates and tools to do it. So think of them as an enablement office. Okay, now again, I haven't finished the story, but let me continue unless there's questions. Okay, so there's an assumption that when we move from a differentiation, this is the Nicholas Carr. I'm giving you lots of examples to tell you similar stories. When organizations first adopt technology, it's a differentiating technology. Same thing like in the 4 quadrants. But now we get universal adoption. Now it no longer is, or does it make sense to create, to allow variability, because it becomes utility. It becomes the lifeblood of the organization. Here it's in the lab. Here it's the primary way of generating revenue. Here I don't even have the ability to fall back to the previous approach, right? I can't pull out a credit card anymore and a credit card authorization machine and manually make an imprint. If that, you know, if the network is down and I can't connect my point of sale system to my back office systems, the whole outcome shuts down. So I've even lost the ability to fail back to a previous technology, right? So all technology adoption goes through this curve. What it also drives, folks, which is to your advantage, by the way, is a strategy around supply. Here, I generate my own electricity. Here, I disassemble my own electricity and I buy it off the public grid. However, there's a very different approach to consistency and standards. Here, I don't need consistency and standards. In fact, they get in the way. Here, I'm managing a nuclear power plant, and if I don't know what that valve is and I turn it in the wrong direction, that's a problem. So I'm going to need a configuration management database. The problem with is that the psychological mental model of most IT professionals is they think they're still in the lab, but they're actually power. And so the concept of standard process approach to product technology doesn't make sense here, but it's absolutely critical for your survival here. Now, this is a sales conversation, because why would you want to do your own standard commoditized service? Okay, you shouldn't. Let us do it for you. We're power. Now, the reality is that this technology adoption curve and then sourcing strategy has been impacting our organization for decades. This conversation, let me back up one slide. I'm going to talk about service organization trends that follow a typical pattern. The first pattern, which we've already executed on, is technology consolidation for cost savings, because we wanted to make higher profit. Okay, so let's figure out how to make higher profit. Well, we reduce variation. So we went through the data center consolidation projects. All right, we took the SAP data center away from them and put the SAP group in the common data center. We then moved to ERP. Oops, shouldn't have shown you that. Sorry, that's that was not supposed to be there. We went into the ERP consolidation, moving from X number of ERPs, CRMs, etc., enterprise application. Why? Because it doesn't make any sense to have 5 of them. It's a system of parity, not a system of differentiation. We then went through infrastructure consolidation and virtualization on-prem. We then realized, hey, wait a minute, we could actually do that even more cheaply if we actually engage a partner, because it's a commodity service. And so we've been moving this technology consolidation through decades, moving more and more of our workloads to the cloud, because it makes sense to no longer generate our own power. Everybody with me so far? Okay. That was just the beginning. Here's the next stage. Now what happens is the organization recognizes, well, wait a minute, we've got project offices in like 10 different places. We got architect groups in 5. We've got different ways of doing process. We got like 6 different service management tools, right? So there's a beginning of a discussion. Why are we doing business analysis 10 different ways? Where these enterprise capabilities are seen to be enterprise, but they're not being enterprise. We're doing them all different in every silo. So a PMO spins up, an SMO spins up, an enterprise architecture group spins up, a shared risk audit and controls group spins up. Because what's happening is the same thing that happened with the technical consolidation. You're recognizing that, well, A, it's costing me 10 times as much to do it 10 different ways, and B, I'm not getting a consistent approach across scale. So let's create these enterprise groups, but where are they going to report into? Okay, so to get the power they need, they typically, go up to someone high up in the food chain. But that's a problem, because now I get span of control. Like, can't all report into the CIO or global executive, right? So what emerges, folks, is this next level, which is what I'm going to show you. A new third tower is emerging in our industry right now, where all the things on the left, and you could add more if you'd like, have an enterprise mandate. This is back to the overarching and underpinning, okay? Where development and operations basically becomes a choice of sourcing. But if I want the choice of sourcing, I'm going to have a way to consistently keep it done and to govern it. So what's emerging is that the SMO is only one part of a trend. You're actually seeing the emergence of global shared services. In essence, a governance function that is happening for the purposes of what our discussion is today so far. Now, these have to usually be retained inside the organization and never sourced. That's something I should have said about this previous slide. You never outsource this role. This is a retained role. You can outsource the keys, but you can't give the ownership paper away. And so this step is occurring. What happens often is an organization will take 2 or 3 steps towards it. You might get another leader come in, they'll disassemble it all goes back out remote. Then they realize it's too costly and it begins to converge again. But what you're seeing as an SMO occurrence is only still is part of a larger trend. I'm not done, but let's pause for questions.
Remember the initial slide that I shared at the beginning of the presentation where I showed the traditional IT services on the left-hand side, 300 million, and traditional business on the right being 8 billion. There's this little sliver called DWP in the middle, or I guess to the left a little bit. As you were talking in the previous slide, actually in slide 107, and you were saying that, you know, these are things that emerge over time as the company grows and expands and starts thinking like an enterprise. I think we jumped in, Kaz and Shinya, by all means, step in and share your thoughts, or anybody else. I think we took the DWP business unit and started building out that enterprise model as part of the DWP business unit. So as you go back down to slide 108 again, you know, I think a lot of the vision of the DWP business unit fits well into what you're describing here. Kaz and Shinya and Karsten, would you guys all agree? I think John stepped away for a minute.
Partly, because I still think we are in many parts in a pyramid structure, like, so we are all reporting to CIO, not CIO, but the same people. No.
Vertically oriented by specialization.
That from my side, of course, yeah, I agree. But yeah, I understand the Shinya's point.
Yeah, I don't know that we're doing it well, but for instance, we have an enterprise architect office now that we don't have anywhere else, right? And that was built for the sole purpose of supporting DWP, right? So it almost feels like there are components and elements at an enterprise level that were built for the purpose of DWP. But to your point, Shinya, I don't know that they're working the way that we thought they were going to work, right?
What will happen in a world where there's not an enterprise mindset is they will come to the door and say, I think we should try this enterprise approach. And the response they will get is, go away, you're not the boss of me. My us doesn't include you. Or I have the right to individual rights and freedom. So it's a lot to take in, guys, but I'm talking about trends in the industry that emerge as organizations attempt to become unified in their outcome management via their products supported by shared process. There's one more phase to this discussion, and that's the final phase. And the organization, if they move far enough along in this journey, will start to say, well, why do we have an IT risk and audit and a business risk and audit? Why do we have an IT project management office and a business project management office? You know where I'm going with this, right? What emerges as a final stage is enterprise shared services, where you understand that a digital organization has the concept of no separation of church and state between IT and the business, where digital transformation requires this concept we talked about earlier today. Sorry about that. I need to get my eyes figured out here. Where's that digital slide I'm looking for? There we go. IT transformation versus business transformation. Digital transformation, digital shared services. So the whole world is on a journey. There's one last part of this conversation, which is SIAM, which is part of this dialogue, but let's pause and consider what we're talking about so far. The SMO, let's go back to your slide now. And let's think about the SMO is one part of a larger service organization governance. And traditionally, though you might change it up in your situation, the ITSM aspect of that is usually around the practices of the factory. Other areas have other practices as well, or if you want to think about the ITIL 4, all of those practices could be under the context of a SMO, depending on what the scope and scale of SMO is in an organization. ITIL 4 would say it's all now collective under a governance framework for consistent practice and approach to product and service. So whether SMO includes all of these or it's just a specific set of practices, that's a choice. You guys are either shocked or dismayed, but you're very quiet right now.
Sorry, I'm actually trying to help John Kern get back. My apologies.
Okay. But the whole goal we're trying to get is a consistent approach to product service management and a consistent factory process. And when I say consistent, you've decided what consistent is. It's not a one size fits all. You've made decisions around what consistency equals based on every single one of the practices not being at one point, but at different points of uncontrolled or controlled by intent for the best interest of the organization. You may leave things on the right or bring them to the left. How big is your us, guys?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's a really good takeaway from today is how big is our us? And I think the answer to that would depend on who you ask.
Yeah, I agree. But to get to this shared platform, you'd have to answer those 5 questions from this morning. It comes back to that.
You've really done a good job of kind of combining a bunch of the different ideas and thoughts and questions that we had. Yeah, John can't get connected. I don't know why.
There's one interesting, there's one more interesting thing to this whole story. This is probably not related to you, but you guys live in the managed services world, so you should know about its emergence. And that is when organizations become so complex in their supply model, this becomes so problematic, it becomes a full-time focus for an organization called a service integrator. And this is the next evolution of this discussion. Are you familiar with the SIAM model, the service integrator concept?
I learned about it recently. I think Causes is familiar with it.
So multi-supplier models in SIAM, this is emerging as a concept that emerges from our dialogue and builds on it. So they're trying for enterprise, shared, consistent, coherent. There's been a lot of work done by major brands out there to try to find ways to do this. And there are basically 4 models that have been put forward as kind of how would an integrator model look like. And so one approach is called the internal service integrator. So that structure that I just showed you primarily retained internal, and their entire reason to exist is to create integration across towers. Some of those towers internal, some of them towers externally supplied, right? Or we could hire, I don't know, KPMG to be the integrator, or Lockheed Martin, or Wipro, right? Whatever. Or yes, maybe Konica Minolta could be the integrator, because that's the job is of the integrator to integrate all of the different towers for us. Now, this is a little bit different, by the way, than a lead supplier. And I'll talk about why, because a lead supplier, a service integrator, is a kind of a failed experiment. Or there's a combination of both internal and external. Now, there's typical capabilities which are never externalized to sourcing. So these are retained capabilities, right? So these are things that are never outsourced. Then there are things which are given to the integrator. Remember, this integrator can be internal. It could be this macro service management office concept that I've just described. Or it could be external, or it could be a hybrid of both. So here's an example of a case study we're working with in Australia to do this situation. So the Australian Tax Office, it's a fairly large organization, okay? It's basically a countrywide ministry. And they went out the gate with the traditional prime and lead. Prime is lead, and they changed to this approach. But let me describe what you're seeing here versus the traditional lead supplier. So in a lead supplier context, what happens is this: a government says, we need one throat to choke. So we're going to go out and get a managed service provider of renown and note. And we're going to say, you guys take care of all our IT services for us. And the subs, you figure it out. You're the prime, you're building the house. If you want to sub out the cabinets in the basement or different part of the house, up to you. But you're on accountability for the build and for the performance of the house. And so in the lead supplier model, who do the subs work for? The practitioner or the lead supplier? Who do you think? Who are they contracted to? In a lead supplier model, who do the subs work for? The practitioner or the lead supplier? You guys understand my question?
No. So which one of these? ATO customer?
So this is Australian Tax Office, but this is not a lead supplier. In a traditional model, if I wanted one throat to choke and I said, Lockheed Martin, go out and source all of the towers below. But I want one throat to choke, Lockheed Martin, you're my guy. Who do these towers work for in that traditional model, which is not the visual you see on the screen?
Yeah,
For the lead supplier.
The lead supplier. So their affinity and their relationship is to the lead supplier.
Right.
Okay, not the practitioner organization. So that's different than what I'm showing you here. In the SIAM model, you have an integrator, and that integrator is responsible for the performance of the various towers, but not the contractual relationship. The contractual relationship is to the practitioner organization.
Ah,
The performance relationship is to the integrator. And of course, that means all of the contracts have to be aligned down here to dictate that that's how you must play if you want in on this system. So, of course, Lockheed Martin can't change how these organizations work, especially this organization, which is an internal retained on-premise group, right? All they can do is when you enter our environment, integration begins at the door, meaning when you come into my house, take your shoes off. So it's integration at the points of interception, integration. Not how you work in other clients, not how you work back at home, but when you're eating family dinner with me, this is how you will operate. And you'll operate on these tools and in these according to these performance expectations. And then the integrator, in this case Lockheed Martin, is responsible to make sure that that happens, to create this center of excellence, this service management capability. Now that was a failed first attempt, largely because the folks on the right didn't really appreciate being governed by people outside of their brand. So the second phase of their integrator approach went to hybrid. So part of their integrator was internal employees, and part of their integrator was Lockheed Martin. So that the folks down here had people overseeing them that they recognized as part of their family. And that these folks over here were being managed performance-wise by another, in essence, competitor, but they understand that's what it meant to play in this situation. So the ATO integrator model went this direction. Now, this middle line could be completely on-prem internal too, which brings me back to this role here, right? This could be on-prem, it could be a hybrid, it could be completely outsourced. However, I'll show you another model. So this model here is the British government. So what you've got going on here, blue is the retained organization, okay? So strategy, architecture, so this is product, this is service, this is, you know, who am I and what do I want to be when I grow up? This is retained but supported by a managed service provider. So they're adding resources to it. So there's still on-prem ownership, but they've added pair of hands and capability, technical or otherwise. Right? So retained but supported by managed service provider. These ones here have been sourced to a SIAM integrator. So this is being handled by the integrator, which is integrating the traditional technology towers. So what you're seeing here is another application to a next level of shared services. And this is big business.
huh.
So it all comes back to, yes, it's a governance type of function. How big is your SMO, Doug? Is a question. Is all of this under the SMO, or part of it, or just certain things? But it is a governance function, not an execution or management one.
Can I share?
Please.
Okay, so I'm going to have to rewatch a lot of what you've gone through to gain a better understanding, but you've given me a lot to think about. As you've been talking, I've been trying to take what you've shared and piece it together in the world of Konica Minolta and specifically DWP and my role as Director of Global Service Planning. And I've come up with something that's very early in my head anyways, in terms of planning and thinking through this process, but I have a much better understanding now of what an SMO really does. And that is, an SMO is a governing body responsible for things like standardization, best practices, SLA, reporting, basically keeping the portions of service that it's connected to operating the way it's supposed to operate by
Maybe even shared
um,
tooling as well for that purpose.
right.
Yep.
Now, in addition to the SMO, which is kind of where I thought planning would go, but you further explained that service planning is not part of service management office. It's SMO is a governing body, not a planning body. So you've got this other entity responsible for planning services from demand management or whatever. There's multiple sources, right? So we'll just call it demand management and assume there's lots of sources where that comes from.
So
internal and
that's
external.
your product and service owners working with product strategy, service portfolio management. That's how that works. But you would make sure that those practices are consistently done in that way with these roles taking responsibilities for that action.
Right. So there's got to be another entity responsible for planning of services, which is not the same as operating. It's just the planning piece of the ITIL framework, right? And then it's handed over after transition to be operated by what we're calling now the service factory, but really it's the service operations factory, if you want to maybe clarify the role and responsibility of that factory. And given the governance model that we talked about earlier, where it's really good, it could be a federated factory where portions of the service are delivered centrally, and portions of it's delivered at the local operating company, or there's only governance and the entire service is operated at the operating company level. But the SMO would be responsible for the governance, and that governance would be federated, right, between the two operating company and the global entity.
Yes, yes, and yes.
So
And
these
but
that
may
all
I
kind of
qualify that it's not just operate. Planning is a part of the value chain. So how planning is done is a part of the mandate of how SMO would be involved to ensure the planning approaches are defined, the roles and responsibilities, know what they're supposed to do, and they do that on a regular cadence.
right. Again, governance, right? So even the planning model is governed by the SMO.
Mhm.
Now, going back here, Shinya, this selfishly, that was very helpful for me, but I don't think we answered the question yet of how product managers, product owners, service owners, and the service functions could work better together. I think I'm still missing that piece, although down here, what I just heard Troy say was demand management could come from a product owner or a product program manager. So I get that there's input from those two roles into service planning, but I don't know that I clearly understand yet any better than I did when I started how these roles should work together. So Shinya, any thoughts on what you've learned so far?
Yeah, at least we should, when we discuss this service, I mean, let's forget about how our development teams are formed for now, because it's anyway will be led by product manager or product owner in more customer value perspective or unit. Make sense for that part?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then somewhat similar to what Kaz showed, I think for the maybe service line or some group of services, we should define a cross-functional team involving service owner or SPIs.
Yes, I can help by translating SAFE to the discussion so far, because that's a thing that you guys have your in mind, and it relates to this. So if I might take it back for a second.
You bet.
Okay. Now SAFE has done a very good job to create a bit more systemic thinking, other than just at the obtain build level, which is where we could see software development, well, design, obtain, build. So let's think about these two activities of the value chain. Okay. And so SAFE will be engaging. It will be planning. From that, I will get a portfolio decision, prioritization, transition is release cadence, right? And then this is safe. But there's another part of that, which is production and support. Safe doesn't have that. But you told me the same teams who do this stuff also do production and support, right? Second, third level. So safe is a picture that maps to this, but it's not the totality of the value chain. It's still being directed by strategy. So there's my portfolio management. Who's involved in strategy? Well, solutions management. Think about that as your service owner, right? And solution management is supported by product management. And those product management are being supported by product owners. And I can see where you picked up your language from, because that's directly out of SAFe. So this concept, this maps to, in part, this part of the value chain. Now, what SAFe doesn't handle, though, is not only the run or support side of the work, but also SAFe is only handling that, which is strategic demand intake and alignment for where we need to go and how to get there. It doesn't understand that the same organization, service organization, gets requests, which are not projects, right? And operational issues, which are not projects. So that service organization is broader than software development and projects. Everybody with me so far? SAFe is a part of the picture. It is not the totality of the value chain.
What did you cover up there, Troy? I didn't catch what you were when you said this. Oh, okay, service portfolio management, right?
If you want to go back here, there we go. That's maybe a better picture, because if you use SAFe to handle enhancements, fair enough, that's coming in as well. If not, then it's only initiative based, which is coming through here. Because I want you to think about this portfolio again. This is SAFe. But hopefully SAFe is dealing more than just external demand. Also considering your retirement, your legacy, your foundational IT projects you need to do customer projects with. So SAFe maps to a good portion of the value chain, but it doesn't include all of it. I had this conversation with the folks at SAFe, because again, that's a role that I play. And they asked me to take their leadership class, so I'm SAFe certified. And it's still not the whole value chain. It's the planned work side of the value chain.
Can you blow the SAFe model back up again so we can see it a little bigger?
Yeah, thank you.
We
got enterprise strategic themes, interfacing into portfolio. Portfolio is driving the planning and strategy side. We got, of course, solutions, which we call service now, because I told you those words in this language can be synonymous, right? Now, solution, don't think technical solutions, think outcomes in problem solving to support portfolio. So these things are connected, they're not disconnected. But the products support the outcomes, and the teams, the products. All of this is lined. This backlog drives this backlog. This backlog drives this backlog. This backlog drives those backlogs.
Let me try to put some practical examples into the model, and maybe you can tell me if I've got this even close to right. So program portfolio management identifies a need to provide customers with business continuity and disaster recovery.
Yeah,
Is
okay.
that a solution, or is that a portfolio item?
So you said, I have an idea, customers, okay? And so you basically went out the engaged or the value chain and presented a concept to a customer. So you went through this discussion. I had a plan. I had someone meet with my customer through Engage, and I presented them an opportunity. What do you think about this? Would you like one of those? Right? So that's one way that, because opportunity and demand, we don't just receive demand, we also shape demand through opportunity.
Right.
But I can also say, I'm hearing all this demand in a certain service we don't offer. Let's take that in and let's look at it in our plan. So that also goes into portfolio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead, Chino.
But remember,
so,
demand intake is strategic, tactical, as well as operational. Because the things I hear about my products at the service desk should find their way up into strategy decisions.
Right.
yeah, Troy, can you make that diagram larger again?
Which one? This one here?
The safe. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, how we are doing the portfolio management today. So it's like if we want to go with establishing dealers channel, or if we want to expand our target customer with to enterprise segment, or the monitoring solution replacement for the whole DWP as well. So those things are discussed in this very top portfolio level. In our meeting with like go-to-market and our sales companies, services, that's what we are discussing now. And you see that epics or enablers.
Yes,
There.
those are big
Yeah, we are
initiatives.
kind of prioritizing and allocating resources. That's what we are doing.
So
And
go ahead,
when
yes.
epics or those epics are like prioritized, then it will be moved. So we don't have the second layer today. So it will be brought to the program layer, and then product manager will break that down to system.
Yes.
The pieces that dev teams can develop. And what is missing really currently is in epics, at the very top, epics discovery, there is no service planning actually involved.
Right.
Only architecture one or
Right.
sales perspective. So I think that's where we are missing the service side involvement. And also, yeah, and also on the program level, there should also be the involvement or collaboration so that we have consistency.
I want to show you something as well, which will come into this.
Right, Shinya? Sorry, Troy, real quick. It's going right now. It's going the other direction. We're going from. Can you go back to the safe?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'll be right. I'll go back there. Yep, go ahead.
It's actually going from portfolio management down to program management, and then back up to service management. So we've built something, and then we've said later, okay, now go build the service around it. We built a product and came back up and said, now go build something to deliver to the customer.
That's reversed, guys. So this is, I'm trying to map it as best I can, but SAFe is not a total service orientated approach. You won't read much of what I'm describing in the SAFe itself. The service portfolio management is not project portfolio management nor product portfolio management. It's what kind of services do we want on our website? And where are we going as an organization? And then what products do we need to bring in to actually accomplish those services?
So actually it makes sense, right? Because you say it's not part of SAFe, and Shinya is saying we are missing this.
I
So
missed that part.
because it's not part of it, simply.
No, SAFe is very project and application centric. Right? I'm just mapping the SAFe language to the bigger story I'm telling you. But SAFe is not a service-oriented model. It's an application-centric but strategic model, because it allows me to understand that I do have to align team-based backlogs with higher strategy objectives, right? That's the problem most organizations have, is that there's a gap between those two things. And so I think I skipped the slide, but I had it in here. This is the problem we have today. We make strategic decisions, right, around where we're going and how we want to get there. But then how do we translate those strategic decisions down into a team-based backlog? Without these intervening levels like SAFe describes, or the practices that I've shown you, it doesn't happen. Or the roles of product and service ownership, it doesn't, because that has to be translated down into local backlogs. That comes from these conversations. Taking all of this up here. I want to show you something in light of this conversation, but please go ahead.
Yeah, and those lacking of all the service perspective discussions, I don't think that is because of the SAFe, but because of our organization. Organization is really like feature or product or those kind of mindset full of. So
I want to show you
go-to-market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to show you guys something that's relevant to this discussion. This is Hoshin Kanri. This is principle-based leadership based on strategy, which aligns both my portfolio program and projects and my operating model. But this is usually missing in most organizations. And this is a case study of an organization in the higher ed world that I'm working with that have developed the things in blue, but the things in gray are not defined for them. And of course, what is not defined cannot be stabilized, measured, or improved. But what they have in blue, they have. So this organization has a set of values or shared principles, right? These are good. These tell me what kind of organization I want to be. This T-shaped thing, this collaborate kind of, what is my belief system? But they're published everywhere. They're on walls, they're on mice pads, but they don't actually impact anything from a decisioning premise. I want you to imagine that there are two gears here. There's this gear, which is my values, vision, and mission. And ideally, it's leveraging a higher level purpose. Like DWP's vision and mission should be correlated with and mapped to and support larger Konica Minolta vision and mission. But I can self-identify what that means for me now within the context of a larger brand. Right, so it's driven because I serve a higher purpose. So that tells me what my values are, the vision I want to aspire to, and then the mission, the reason I exist. Now this gear should then direct my annual objectives. SAFe would call them strategic themes. The things I want to accomplish this year, because this is an annual planning process. This is my portfolio to project now kind of conversation. My breakthrough objectives could be multiple areas, but now these objectives, which would be my epics, okay, if you want to translate it to SAFe language again, could be measured by my key result areas, which is the things which measure whether I'm achieving my objectives or not. Now, this organization knew they should measure something, but they didn't connect their key result areas to anything other than these would be good to measure. So thumb in the air, let's measure these, right? So they're not driving any behavior, nor are they actually influencing what should be on my portfolio based on my objectives, based on the organization I want to be. If this is my portfolio now, what do I want it to be in the future? What do I want it to be? What do I want to get rid of? So the portfolio outcomes of things that I currently have and are in the pipeline should then drive my program prioritization, which then drive my projects. In this case, this didn't exist. They were running projects, but the squeaky wheel got the grease. right? There was no basis of prioritization of projects based on strategic themes. It was, okay, who's got the money and who's yelling the loudest? The thing is, if I want to achieve these objectives, I have to align my portfolio, and then that should drive which projects I do in sequence, right? But there's another thing. I have to now look at my operating model. Part of my operating model is deficient to achieve these results and to achieve those objectives. So I'm not only driving changes and improvements in my portfolio, I'm also changing the way I work. I'm looking at my major capability areas, the processes within them, the roles within those capability areas, the knowledge and skills those roles should need. And I say, well, to achieve these objectives, to be this organization, to achieve these measures, these are the adjustments I need to make in my operating model, my process factory, right? As well as what portfolio adjustments I need to make. So this is a gear, Hoshin Kanri, a planning gear, which is directed toward my true north, my compass. And so thoughts, because this now drives into everything we're talking about. This is a governance deliverable, folks. To be governed, to be led.
Yeah, and we are more or less doing this, I believe. For example, for last year, we had one objective to extend our sales channels to dealers, right?
Great,
For
yeah.
example, one of the objective.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and based on that, as a portfolio, one of portfolio,
Yes, good.
create dealer channel to enable the dealer channel, dealer portal should be delivered. That's one example. So, however, as I said, dealer portal, we are always talking about features or products and not services.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a gap I see.
And where I see a lot of gaps in companies I work with is that if they have this alignment system, they have it focused on projects, but they never associate their ability to hit their objectives to their operating model, which is equally a dependency, which is the factory.
You're mentioning about a breakthrough objective. Such kind of area we were missed.
These are the strategic objectives this year. These go back to your SAFe model. But again, what you're talking about, are you talking product or outcomes, right? So when you see the SAFe again, they're going to see the same thing in the top left corner. Right? So your strategic themes are what are called breakthrough objectives on the other slide. Those are strategies around to achieve our mission. What are objectives as an organization? What new services? What new markets? What businesses do we want to get into? What services do we need to have for those businesses? And then what products are we going to use for those services? That's the flow of thought. And then what suppliers will we need to plug into that supply channel to do it? So it's in alignment with this, but I have to find a way to get this to drive this.
Yeah, so as I said, for product part, it's connected. Objectives, the portfolio, the priority.
Yes.
Portfolio level, and what's being developed. So the missing part is how this service planning
These are missing links.
Yeah.
Right.
Service ownership, service catalog.
So we got that. But everything to the left is the question. And the product owner may or may not be the service owner. Again, that's a conversation of scale. If this is a technology or enabling capability, this is the outcome, the result, and the solution that's out here. So we think back to the earliest slides from today. Services always are built from products who are bundled into offers, which are outcomes that allow me to have relationships. This is a service-centric mindset versus a product-centric mindset. Which is, from our earlier discussion, moving from the left to the right of this model here.
Yeah, yeah.
So notice the word service, adoption service, managed operate services over here. Over here, these are implementation services. You really can't get to the right, guys, until you have these roles with the accountabilities that we described in place that work with your portfolio as a strategy and governance. The answers are there. So the approach is known. Is your culture willing? Is another question.
But anyway, from that portfolio level, the service portfolio discussion, governance committee needs to be established. Otherwise, nothing will happen.
Yes. And then you have to find a way to translate all of this shared demand into a single funnel. Right? This can't be an IT directed thing. This has to be an enabled, facilitated discussion. Can't do everything. So you have all these mini funnels hitting a shared funnel. And it has to now include all of these different concepts. Which before you get to project portfolio, which is my annual process for funding projects. That's why in ITIL, strategy and service portfolio feed and drive PPM.
Right. So, Doug, do you think it is realistic to move or evolve the quarterly meeting we are doing with go-to-market or the key stakeholders to this this committee, the service portfolio committee?
I think it's going to take time, but I think so. Part of our challenge is that we have been, the DNA of this company is a product out DNA.
Because
I think I failed miserably at building this slide, but I tried to get my thoughts on a paper so I could share it. I think this is part of the challenge that we have, right? So Workplace Hub as an example was built as a product, and the mindset was, I've done my research in the marketplace. I've spoken with Gartner and with Forrester, and I know what the market needs. So I'm going to build what I think the market needs, and then I'm going to bring it to the market, and I'm going to let the customer know that I've got something that they need. Meanwhile, the customer has very specific business requirements and strategic initiatives, and the salespeople are trying to make this round or square peg fit into the round hole. Where in a service organization and in a service mindset, the approach is very different. The approach is that the sales rep or the business relationship manager comes to the customer and says, how can I help? What are your needs? What are some things that you need from me? And then the customer explains their needs, and the business relationship manager turns to their service catalog and finds the services that best meet the customer's needs and requirements. And those services are supported by products, but the customer doesn't know what those products are. All the customer knows is that the business relationship manager and the company are going to provide solutions, services that meets the needs of the customer. So can we turn our culture from product out to client in? I think so. I don't know if I explained this in a way that makes sense or not, but I think we could do that.
I'd like to share something I don't have to create a slide for it. I'd like to now articulate the difference between design thinking and minimum viable product that you just described, which is another emerging concept in the DevOps community, but it's, again, not creative. DevOps creates nothing, it just collects. So minimum viable product says, I've got an idea, says provider. Let me show you my idea before I spend some money on it and make sure that I'm going the right track. And so I show you something, and based on your feedback, I'll go away and I make another iteration, and I'll show it to you again. And this is a way to ensure that I iterate on design, build compelling interest, of course, in the customer, because they're part of the co-created value for design, and I don't spend money on something people don't want, right? So that's key. That's all good. That's the minimum viable product concept and agile iteration. But design thinking actually starts before that solution ideation process. Design thinking says, tell me what's a good day, what's a bad day, and really what are your problems? It's not me bringing a solution. It's I really want to understand and empathize the situation. And as I learn and understand, I'm at the Gemba, where work happens, I begin to see and start to identify with my customer what the problem is. We co-create the problem before we identify a solution. And then I will go into ideation on solutioning, but only until I do empathize and feedback loops on what is the problem we're trying to solve. So I'm shifting left once again. I'm doing a design sprint before I do a build sprint. And this is emerging as a new concept, but it's not new. So it's exactly what you just described, Doug.
Yeah, it's good.
So we call that design thinking. So if you want to do a Google on design thinking, you'll find all kinds of stuff on it.
Mm.
And that's the service owner and the relationship manager, maybe a business analysis conversation going on. That's exactly as you described it.
Yeah, and the product development team itself is really like MVP has MVP mindset and really has a willing to work with customers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the whole organization is totally different.
Yep.
Mm.
Sorry, there was an interruption. Srini, can you repeat who is already thinking that you said?
Development teams. The
Development
people we hired, they are all those kind of developers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're coming from outside, from a different mindset
Right.
or industry. That's maybe the reason. Yeah.
So there's two ways to build, based on forecast or based on pull. Okay. I have a great idea. I think they're going to love it. Let me build it and let them come. That's forecast-based design and development. Pull is let me discover the need and build it in small iterations. Lenovo, formerly IBM ThinkPad, was built on Forecast. Well, didn't work so well for IBM. Versus Dell builds on pull, based on demand.
So Shinya, you know, I've learned I know we all have learned a great deal on this call so far, and you know, my takeaways, I think, are going to be based around services factory. Okay, gosh, I had a scary moment there where I thought I had lost my slide deck that I had built. You know, federated governance, service management office, services operations factory, which I think I'm going to change the name of that. You know, the 5 questions, services planning sitting outside of both SMO and service operations factory. All those things I think were really beneficial for me. How are you feeling about how PM and service owners and service management should be working together, knowing that SAFe doesn't really have a place for that?
Yeah, I don't so much sticking to SAFe. It's just our current how can I say roles, team roles are based on it. So if we can, how can I say, based on what we learned today, it is possible, at least our team and your team. However, if I see the whole organization involved, it's still difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
It's top of the hour. How about we take a 15-minute break? I know Kaz just pinged me, and I know I could use a break as well. How about we take a 15-minute, we come back and work on a 45-minute wrap-up? Does that work?
Okay.
Troy?
Where do you want to go from here? Because I've done any kind of conversation. Well, I'm done presenting anything I prepared, but what's the next step for you, Doug?
Yeah, I think our next step is maybe to share a little bit more of our understanding to you
Okay.
for the purpose of validation. So Shinya, you and I kind of brainstorm. Karsten, let's start brainstorming about what our outcome should be from this you know, nearly all-day meeting with Troy, and start asking questions that are going to lead to some kind of an outcome.
Very good.
Yeah. That's the reason, so Troy, so that I need to clear my brain by myself. Then so we conclude and close this workshop. Yeah, it's absolutely great the conversation. However, yeah, we need to some output or alignment or at the end of workshops. That's the reason I asked to have a short break.
So
All right,
10 minutes break or
let's
15?
do 15, come back 20 minutes after the hour, and we'll finish up.
Okay. Very good.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thanks, everybody. Hey, Shinya,
Yes.
are we following full safe, portfolio safe, large,
Portfolio.
or a
Basically, the two layers, program and teams, the two layers safe. Let me see, what was that called? Essential. No, sorry. Essential one. And partly portfolio.
Yeah, I took the safe leadership class, which is more about the strategy part of it. Safe is, please don't get me wrong, I am not decrying safe at all. It fits well. You just need to align it to the bigger story.
I'm just trying to
There's no
figure out
reason
which one we're.
to let it go or to replace it. It actually is better than most agile methods for connecting agile concepts to larger approaches.
So this is the business. This is the
It's version 5. I had version 4 up. But this, yeah, this is good.
This is portfolio, and this is full.
Yeah, when we discussed this, there were only one agile release train for Workplace Hub. And within our business unit, for example, we have Marketplace, which is developed in completely another train. So we could have solution combining those two trains, but we didn't because the organization is totally different. We didn't
So
think
one of the things I don't like about, there's some things I like about 5 and some things I don't like about the 5 picture. You see that on the top level, you see strategic themes, portfolio, vision. That's all good. On the right-hand side, vision and roadmap, that's all good. But they lost their solutions level. And so they basically it's product straight to portfolio, which unfortunately doesn't follow the conversations of today. Outcomes versus products. They do have design thinking in there though, which is cool. Kanban, Scrumban.
But you see the objectives there. So it's really small, but PI objectives and agile release train.
Continuous exploration. PI objectives, I see, yes.
Yeah. So,
that's like the definition of done for the PI, for the increment.
So there it should be defined. The outcomes.
It's just they lost something here, which was the solution dialogue, which I think was a better map to the conversations of today.
I totally agree anyway. And this is very product or software oriented.
It's still not unaligned. It's just to be, considered one of many things as part of the toolkit. No reason to abandon it as long as we understand that the larger context of the system exists within.
Here's this solution context.
I'd have to read what that is now in 5. That's interesting. The context of solution. Products in context of solution. Okay, I can go there. That's interesting. So I know I've laid a lot on you guys, but we didn't end up following the agenda like sequential, but we went back and forth, I think, all day long in respect to thought, discussion. What are we doing? So hopefully that met your objective still, Doug, even though we didn't do it sequentially the way we had initially talked about.
I think it was great dialogue. Sometimes when you're going through and being taught something and your mind goes a certain direction, you kind of got to follow that, right? To connect the dots and gain some context. So I think you did a great job with flipping between slides and bringing context to what we were talking about. What I want to make sure we do now is that there's some kind of an outcome or output from this time that we've spent together, and also next steps. You know, I mean, as I'm sitting here listening to you, and John Kern and I were kind of going back and forth about how much you know and understand about service management and service delivery and all these different frameworks. It's very impressive, and it's great to have someone to kind of bounce those questions and ideas and thoughts off of that can give context across multiple frameworks. You just don't find that every day. So that's been, for me, very helpful. And I think there'd be value in engaging you at different levels. What I'd like to do is I'm going to probably go take the video and dissect it into little snippets and share some of them with certain people within the organization to try to convince them.
You're dropping for me, Doug. I don't hear you right now.
Uh-oh, you can't hear me?
I'll hear you now. I lost you for 10
Oh,
seconds. I saw
I'm
take
gonna-
the video.
I'm
That's the last thing I heard you
I'm
say.
going to take snippets of the video, yeah, and share it with key stakeholders in an effort to try to convince them that we could use more of your consulting services in different areas of the business. You know, I have a foot. I've got about 20% of my feet into all covered, and about 80% of my feet into DWP. And John Kern is actually opposite. He's 80% all covered, 20% DWP, and Karsten has a connection with and some influence in Germany as well. So I think there's opportunities for us to engage more in the future.
It'd be my pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's been good. So I mean, Shinya, I've taken this away, and again, selfishly, I feel a lot better and much more comfortable with SMO and Service Factory and service planning and how.
Yeah.
You know, I've got to separate things. I had them all kind of mashed together into one big thing that I was calling SMO, and that's not the right approach. So I'll revisit this approach and bring some ideas to Koji and Nick and Cause on some thinking there. I think that the meeting that we had in Hagen, where we went over ITSM ITIL framework with SAFe and kind of mapped out some things, I think that's still relevant. I mean, what are your thoughts, Kaz? Do you feel like that's still a relevant model?
Well, yeah, in Manasam, so development team keep to use this safe agile models. Then so SMO how to adapt this framework. That is my understanding. That is my our challenge. Well,
You think
how things so that yeah originally so that we try to build up the desirable service management office type of organization. I mean, so project-based organization and a responsibility to something. But how do you think about so that once current APM replacement project is a good case, I think. So conceptually, so who and what should be a role of SMO type of job role for APM replacement. I mean, so try to learn on a specific initiative how we can fit the SMO type of concept will work to DWP business.
Yeah.
Simply, yeah. So, so through the discussion, I think so the SMO type of the project team should be responsible for the governance standardization, best practice and service level.
So one thought, guys, is that, you know, and you maybe got frustrated initially, Doug, because I resisted just giving you the SMO story until I told you a lot more. because most SMOs fail. Most SMOs fail unless you have the first part of the conversation in place. You have an organization that wants to work this way. You have a culture that's willing to collaborate this way. You have people, process ownership and service ownership structures that are actually effective. Just by naming them, you don't actually get an effective one, right? Most organizations who set up an SMO find the SMO at the door and say, go away, you're not the boss of me. And then leadership doesn't support the SMO's mandate, even though they, they say they wish for it. And so my cautionary tale is I've seen more SMOs stood up and basically destroyed than I've seen effective ones, but because of the dependencies of culture and leadership, not because of the value of it. So it's not, let's build one and suddenly everything is okay.
Sorry, I was talking to myself on mute. So I appreciate the cautionary tale and also the cautious advice. So Kaz and Karsten and I just came off of a 3-week plus tour of Europe where we visited the operating companies in London, in Germany, in Czech Republic, in Paris, and also a support center in Malta. And the intent of that visit was multifaceted, as you can imagine. But one of them was to seek to understand what they're doing, how they're delivering service, what services they are delivering, what does their service catalog look like, what does their business look like. And then I presented to them this concept of the services factory, where we would standardize to a certain extent the delivery of services that could be standardized. Going back to your slide of the 4 different levels, far right is do it your own and far left is standardized, and kind of asked, what's in your portfolio that we potentially could move further and further to the left. And without exception, everybody was on board with the concept of the services factory. Everybody felt like there was a need for global standardization, for global best practices, for sharing that information. Now, from the standpoint of ownership and delivery of that service, I think the jury is still out, because you're telling somebody that you can do it better somewhere else. And that goes to your slide about federation, right? Where you've got local delivery on the right, centralized delivery on the left, and we can't move all the way left. That, in fact, one of the things that Karsten kept telling us was, you're not going to be able to come into Europe and take a top-down approach and start telling them that it's going to be delivered centrally or globally. In fact, as soon as you use those words, they're going to clam up. And so the message very clearly was, we want to define standards with your help and best practices, and then begin to share those best practices and standards so that operating companies across the globe, as they conformed to those standards, we began to kind of meet in the middle, if you will, and establish a more unified, more harmonized method of delivering services. So that was the message, and the reception of that message was pretty good. But we don't belong to an organization that enforces, right, Troy? So we don't really have a strong CIO presence or a strong centralized leadership team that will tell people what to do. Again, Karsten, Kaz, Shinya, if you think I'm wrong, jump in here, but that's just not our DNA.
So then you're going to need to work middle in, establishing coalitions of the willing until you get to a tipping point. All right. So that's what you got left, and that's not impossible, but your political influence and basically level of coalition of the willing is the scope of your initial foray. And it was said earlier that maybe that's DWP right now.
Yes.
Right. This is Malcolm Gladwell. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Rogers diffusion model. You want to go with early adopters, early majority before you ever even try to introduce a late majority, let alone the curmudgeons and late adopters. Don't even start
Right.
talking to them.
And be strategic about who you allow to participate in this coalition, right? And find the players that are the lowest hanging fruit, that have some business reasons for participating in a coalition and adopting some of these best practices, and use them as a case study, and then present those case studies to markets and regions that maybe would otherwise not be interested.
Yep, you sell up and then you can sell down.
Exactly.
This is middle in. That's what it is. And that's fine. That's what it is.
Yeah, so I feel good about that. We'll see whether adoption occurs, but I don't see any other way of doing it. Top down definitely won't work. We know that. We know that from our conversations in our Seek to Understand meetings. But we also saw a willingness to participate, a willingness to help. But I think there has to be value to the business, and we have to show that every step of the way. That if you participate in the services factory, then you're going to have higher profitability, higher client retention, greater efficiency, reduction in headcount, or shift right. So you can take the headcount that you would have otherwise used and move those to a place where you can deliver more value-added services. And even if we can provide them with some opportunities for training.
When I was trying to create drivers, I was always using business-related drivers. Never, let's talk about maturity of process for its own sake. It was always strategic discussions of parity versus differentiation and total allowable variability in certain contexts. The moment you start talking CMMI and maturity and all of that, you lose people. So keeping it to a revenue or mission-based reasoning is your critical success factor here.
So Shinya, I feel good about what I got from this session. What are the actions related to safe and service and solution management? Is it that we just got to find a way to inject service and solutions into the framework that we're already using?
So what I learned today, one of the very good thing was it's not that safe or ideal. So ideal should work for both, right? So it's not that we inject something to this, but I think there is already a way or a solution we can follow, right? Product owners are already defined in what we saw today. So between service and product side, I don't see much, how can I say, conflict or such things.
They're dependent on each other.
What do you think?
They're dependent on each other. They just need to be put in context with each other.
Yeah.
Products are the basis for how service is delivered and value is created.
Well, if I may, just out of my head speaking, I also like what we saw here today. That's very good. I think it's many things you run into open doors on my side. So it totally makes sense. In the way of how to continue or what could be done, well, maybe I would suggest that internally we will use this. What is just in front of us, the APIM replacement. Maybe we use that as example to define it and to see really who is then the service owner and the product owner accordingly, based on one example, to see how we can work better there together and cover all items.
Yeah, work on concrete topic. I like that approach.
Maybe some practical questions or examples that Troy could chime in on if there's something that some value that he could add there. You know, we look at this column right here. This is the Scarabs team that's responsible for all these concepts, all these components, right?
Mhm.
One of which is monitoring. And there's a significant amount of development work that goes into integrating the monitoring platform into the Workplace Hub platform. And Troy, we briefly described kind of what that platform looked like. It's relatively complicated, right? It's basically cloud native technologies on-prem, so Linux-based operating system with Kubernetes and containers and KVM for hypervisor support, giving the customer a place where they can store their own virtual servers,
Yep.
A virtual firewall. You know, it's kind of an all-in-one. It is an all-in-one solution that can support ultimately a marketplace very similar to how your iPhone or your Android phone would work, where you could go in and select what services that you wanted to consume, and it would automatically load up the appropriate applications and you know, provide these business services to the end user, to the customer. So that's the long-term objective.
So
As
when
we
I look-
replace the monitoring,
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
as we replace the monitoring platform, the current one is really tied into the core operating system. The agents are automatically deployed as part of the setup and kitting process. They automatically register to the backend systems, which are sitting in our data centers. There's a lot of integration that went on. Now that we've decided to change to a different platform, a different solution, we're having now to tear all that out and then inject the new monitoring solution into the platform, which requires development skill, right? And nothing to do with the operation of monitoring, everything to do with the integration of the tool and the platform into the core operating system. There's a whole nother component related to the actual service delivery of monitoring, things like defining the monitors, defining what action should be taken when an alert is triggered, defining how problem management will be handled when alerts come in and incidents are generated and we get repeat incidents. That has nothing to do with development and everything to do with operating the remote monitoring service. So as we look at this diagram here, this is Shinya's teams. They all roll up under Shinya. So we've got Scarab's team that's PM'd, so product manager is Martin Mertz. A brilliant guy, lots of experience, great product manager. Does he know about how to operate remote monitoring? I don't think so. I think that he has an understanding, but he doesn't have a depth of knowledge and skill and capability in that world enough to, for example, create a requirements document or to validate a requirements document. So where does the service ownership, someone who has the skill, the capability to define requirements and ensure that the requirements are being met, you know, where does all that fall in?
So let's unpack.
We need one, I believe. Service owner for monitoring.
I'd like to explore this with you a little bit. As I'm looking at this specific case scenario, that's what you're asking for, like an example. I look at this
Yes.
stack of outcomes. I see a mix of services and a mix of products. So if I was to give this thing the name based on what you described, including the incident problem management, I would call this service resilience services or service resilient automation. I'd see two sub-services, backup and restore. Monitoring hopefully then includes also event management. Monitoring is just the act to monitor. Event management is actually the value-added activity, which is what is the follow-up workflow, not just it is green, yellow, or red, which is also workflow automation. So what I see here is a resilience called service resilience automation. And then I see products. Acronis, Sophos, DYN DNS. Those would be in the descriptions underneath the service or subservice elements.
Right.
And so we need someone who's in the business of service resilience. Right? This is my name. I'm not saying pick that name. Who understands the value of service resilience and is trying its objectives according to mission and customer needs. And then the team would identify with that concept, not the word scarabs. Because that's a nice, cute name, but it has no meaning to the outcome that that team is supporting. Right? And then I'd have a product owner on Sophos, a product owner for Acronis, a product owner for DYN DNS. Those are products that are part of sub-services, which are part of a larger service. And so there's someone who speaks to the life cycle of service resilience automation. I need someone else to be familiar with the specific products that support either sub-elements of that.
Yeah, so I think we do have product owners on them. It just happens to be that all 6 of these are owned by one person.
Right, so the service resilience, the elements of a service resilient outcome, that would be a value conversation to a consumer. The technical product, it just means to the end.
From a skills perspective, I don't know Jan very well. Shinya, I'm sure you do. You know, is Jan a developer, or is Jan somebody who has experience in managing and operating a backup and restore service, or a event management service, or a security incident event management service? Is that who he is?
No, no.
So that's the gap, I think. There's a gap between creating something from an application developer perspective, integrating it into our platform, and then actually delivering the service, which requires, you know, the definition of the operation itself, the definition of the services being delivered, the service levels being delivered, and this stack does not include that. Does that make sense, Troy?
Yes, absolutely. I need competency at all levels. I even need competency at a component level that's below this. And I use the word component now as a individual element of the system, like, you know, a database, a server, a router, an application. And so I need technical competency. I need product competency. I need service competency. Those are all 3 different competencies.
Yeah, very, very high level of technical competency here, right, on this team. These are developers that, you know, when I got on calls with these guys, they get it. They understand. They ask the right questions to ensure that these tools are properly integrated into the core operating system.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about delivering service and operating the service, there's a gap.
And that's why I would suggest that even the team name should represent what they do, not a cute name like Scarabs.
So who feeds the requirements into this group? Is it the PM? Is it the PO? Or is it somebody who's responsible for owning the service?
PM.
The PM stands for project manager or product manager. That's product manager. Got it. Which is, yeah. So that's in essence the life cycle of the product category. Yeah. Now, is that the service owner? Also, that's a question I have. And then do they have the space?
That's the correct of our question as well, right?
Yeah.
Where does the service owner fit?
We do not have service owner, by my understanding.
Yeah, and then you could have category of service owners, which would be yourself, sir. You sound like you are the service line owner for this grouping.
So let me do something that's maybe a little unorthodox, but just bear with me for a second. We'll just pretend on a few things. We'll fill in some blanks. So going back to the service catalog that John showed earlier. So you've got this team here under Scarabs that's responsible for integrating the event management software into the box operating system and into our backend systems called OSS.
Okay.
And then the delivery of that service would be something over here.
Now, is that a direct-to-consumer service, or is that a supporting service into a direct-to-consumer service?
This is a direct-to-consumer service.
Okay, fair enough.
So in the United States, Brian Lucky is the service owner. Brian Lucky reports into a director who reports, he's a national manager who reports into a national director who reports into a vice president who reports into the president. So he's 4 levels deep in the organization chart.
Mhm.
And oh, I didn't know that, John, you were the internal support for this. I thought it would be Dane.
No, that's John Haley.
Oh, sorry, Haley. Sorry, John. That's
Yeah,
correct.
and-
So yeah, John,
but-
right.
But I mean, in
Listen.
reality, Brian Lucky's not the service owner; he's the service line owner, right?
That's right.
And that's a flaw now that I see. I mean, I've always known we had this deficit. I just didn't know what word to put on it. Is we're calling people service owners that are service line owners, and we really don't have service owners. It's people like John Haley, who the SME is acting as kind of the pseudo service owner when things are broken, but he's not paying attention to continual service improvement and the bigger picture.
Mhm.
So this is an issue that we need to deal with.
So Brian Lucky doesn't have enough time in the day to care and feed individual services. Category, yes, not
he's
individual
not.
services. And John Haley isn't thinking through the strategy dialogue of a life cycle.
You
Right.
got it. You
That's
nailed
a
it.
gap.
Yep, that's exactly right.
And
Now,
I think
what's
we have
funny about this
another-
particular- Go ahead.
Another comment, Doug. I'm not sure that you're right here, because the monitoring of Workplace Hub there is not an end user service. It's for the NOx.
So it's an indirect to consumer. So it's a supporting service. So the customer of this service is the NOC.
No. Yeah. So I asked if you just bear with me. We were going to pretend for a minute because we don't have service owners here, right?
Okay.
So let's just pretend that this group was responsible for, the development, and then I just went to the service catalog to use an example. So you're right. If we were doing this specifically for Workplace Hub, we had a service catalog that was crafted and we had service owners defined, then you're absolutely right. But in this case, let's just pretend that the service was being developed by
So can we go back to your website for 1 second? I just want to give kudos. See, the service is remote monitoring. Right, that might be might be a sub-service to something else. That's an appropriate name for an outcome. And then Enable by SolarWinds is the product.
correct.
Yes.
So we don't have this role in here. We have one for All Covered, but we don't have one for DWP. So thinking about, and I know we have gaps here too, John, right? This is a service line owner. But thinking about the service owner's role and responsibility for DWP, this person, even though he's a service line owner, he is keenly aware and understands the platform and the way that it operates, and he builds out the operating models, and he does all the design work for how many people are needed, does all the business requirements. So that's what he's doing right now. We don't have that person in here at all.
And another thing that I see missing between the two, and you had asked this question, Doug, but I don't think we ever got back to it, is who is supposed to be doing the service planning? Who does service planning? Okay. That's a thing that I'm challenged with. So I get a new service that said, John, run this through the service design package process. And I have to find the John Haley. I have to find the technical person to help me build it out. And then they become the SME, but that's not the way it really should be done. I don't think. Like,
So
who does service planning?
Service planning as a category is a service line owner. Service planning at a specific service would be the service owner. And again, depending on size and scale, that might be the same person. But there's a family of service, which is a strategy conversation, as well as a specific service within that family. Normally speaking, the size of your organization, you would have two levels, the category plan, and that would be fed by individual service owner plans.
And I think the SMO supports that as well, right? It doesn't do the planning, but it supports the planning.
It ensures that the practice is defined for how that happens, the cadence in the year that it's supposed to happen, the inputs into that plan are available and on time for that cadence to occur. It would work with a group to say, how frequently do we do this planning? Because annual used to be the kind of go-to, and now we may need to do it quarterly. So that whole, how do we do it? Who does it? How frequently do it? What kind of information do we need as inputs? And what's the expected outputs? Welcome to process governance.
Am I going to the right place here, John?
So do you see the difference between, and even the fact that you have a service design package, and that's part of a service outcome in design, that would be a defined standard for service design as a part of the process.
Yeah, the problem is I'm the one that's running it all, but I'm not the service owner by any stretch. But I'm making sure that all this stuff is identified as we develop new services.
You're performing the function of the SMO right now. That's what
Yeah,
you're doing. You're building.
you're totally right. Yep. You got that. Yep, you got it. What were you looking for, Doug?
No, I found it. It was right. So, and BEU has one as well. In fact, John is working right now with Karsten on this. BEU has a nice pipeline for managing services from beginning to end. The question that you'd asked, John, is who performs the planning? And I think the answer that I'm hearing is that the SMO provides the governance, the standards, the best practices, which would be the pipeline that BEU has created and this documentation that John has created to ultimately create a service design package. But the service owner and the subject matter experts would be the actual planner of the service, because that's who has the expertise.
Correct. Now, the one question still to be answered is, if the service management office creates this capability or enables the ability to be created, who would then own the care and feeding of that process itself? Is that an SMO responsibility, or is that somewhere else in the organization, maybe at a higher level in the food chain? That's an open question, not a directed one.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to create and enable, but who's going to be the parent to care and feed that practice, this portfolio practice? That's also something to be owned. It's a professional service, just like information security would be, or project management.
Well, who's defining, who's designing the service? This is still the question.
Well, the answer is the service owner and this SME in support of the service line owner.
Right. And they get triggered from the demand or from whatever is maybe having a good idea about the service.
And that demand is coming into the service owner, both strategic, tactical, and operational. They're watching a catalog. Who's ordering what? Who's not ordering what? What do I need to stop doing because no one's ordering it, right? What complaints am I getting from the consumers? All of that.
This is then also a bit of the job then of the service catalog manager to see how many services are ordered, which ordered.
You bet your bottom dollar that Amazon is doing catalog analysis.
But I think, Troy, would it be accurate to say that, you know, the planning of the service is multifaceted, right? It's not just a technical service. So the SME is going to provide the technical service planning. The service owner is going to help to design not only the technical piece, but the service levels and you know, the portions of the service that the SO is going to be responsible for. And then the director of service planning would be responsible for ensuring that business requirements are being met, the collaboration with executive management and leadership are being met, and that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed before this thing goes live.
All true. And it's in sequence with the financial management and budgeting processes and annual business planning, all of the above.
So short answer to a long question is, no one thing or one entity or one role or one person does the planning. Planning is a function that's fulfilled by a group of people that have varying roles and responsibilities. And ultimately, when the service has been transitioned, the service owner owns that service through the life cycle.
And it's constant improvement, maintenance, and potential retirement and replacement.
So someone should be assigned to that. There should be a service owner to every service.
Otherwise, we have a latchkey service and it's eating a lot of craft dinner.
Right. Exactly.
Everything has to be
So
owned,
again,
guys.
I go back to, where does that fit? Shinya, where does that fit in this, right? Where does that fit in here?
We don't see that role.
Yeah. So I think that's an action that we need to take away from here is,
Yeah, because you have to remember where
doing-
SAFe came from. SAFe came out of a software development mindset, not a systems and services mindset. That's a better way of saying it. They're very easy to map and marry. One is not better than the other. Just what I would actually say SAFe fits within the larger context of service management. It's an organizational capability for delivering value in the form of products and services. And I would call it software development and management, planning and portfolio management. Those are two practices.
right?
Right, quick question. The safe or agile, they say they have the so capable for enterprise. However, it means enterprise is not enterprise system, enterprise application. What do you mean?
Well, enterprise in this case, I think please repeat your question. Make sure I understand it completely.
Or simply agile or safe agile, they say they have so enterprise framework.
Ah, yes.
But yeah,
It's
only about the application.
yes.
Through your comment. That's
It's
my
an
answer.
application software-centric mindset. And the decisions around it could then only apply to the application component of a system. If I overemphasize portfolio planning and funding on the application, but de-emphasize the other components of the system, I still get degraded service availability. Does that make sense?
Yeah, understand. Now I understand why we are so often create a group work processes, but they didn't differ well. That is my question from the past. Yeah, now I understand. Thank you very much.
It's a great framework, but it's not the whole picture.
Yeah.
And to look at it only is to be myopic.
Understand. Thanks.
Kaz, would you mind sharing one more time the slide deck that you were sharing earlier?
Okay.
Troy, I would just like to get your thoughts or validation, I guess, about slide 0. Go to 0 first.
This one?
That one, yep. So,
Yep.
Troy, I know you recognize this, right? This is ITIL V 2011. And if you go to the next one. So here's where we attempted to map product management with service ownership. And we did that by kind of specifying what are the roles and responsibilities of a service owner, and how does that map to the various roles within SAFe, product manager, product owner. We didn't really get into RTE or Scrum Master, just those two seemed to match the most. And we decided that product manager would be responsible ultimately for end-to-end ownership of a particular product. Did we get that right or wrong? Is the product
it's totally right.
Yeah.
What I'm struggling with is the delineation between product owner and project manager. I see it completely different than what you've described here.
So our thought process there was in the transition phase, a service is brought to market in a transition phase where a project is created and implemented to bring it to the operation state. So we put project manager as the implementer, I guess, of the transition phase. There really was no ownership. It was
So
product
this is
owner
where,
designs.
yeah, this is where ITIL 3 is not going to solve your problem. May I shake it back? I'm going to ask you
Yeah,
to
yeah.
abandon ITIL version 3's lifecycle picture. All right, so let's go back to the ITIL 4 value chain, and I'm going to show you where ITIL 4 is still including everything you knew of ITIL 3, but it goes beyond it because it needs to expand beyond it. Okay, where's my, here we go. I want to walk you through this discussion. Okay, so first of all, put that away. Okay, think about a project as a temporary structure that I form to walk me through the entire, from concept to available. I create a structure called the project team to go through all of these steps until it's available first time. And now I need a team to deliver and run that service. Project teams are temporary structures to actually go from concept to available. So a product owner or a service owner, they both own the life cycle, all right? A life cycle at the product level, Sophos, a life cycle at a service level, backup and restore, or monitoring and event management. Those are two separate life cycles and they have to be owned. Same person, maybe. But let's imagine I have an idea, right? So here's my strategy conversation. Strategy, ITIL strategy. Got some ideas. I think we should go to market with this. Let me go out and talk to my customer. So I come through the engage, through relationship management, and I talk to somebody and say, how about this? Does that look good? And I get some feedback. Well, that sounds good. Let me bring it back up at the strategy. Well, we could do it this way, but we have to fund it. So we have different models of funding and different strategy. Let me go back and see if this works. And so I go back and feedback loops. Now that I finally get an agreement with my customer, I go, okay, now I've got it lined up. Where do I slot it in to all of the work my team has to do? So I've got a backlog grooming activity that basically goes on to basically say, this is what we need to do. Now it's next in queue. All right, now I got to build a design for it. So to John's point, I create a service design package. Well, let me talk to the consumer about that, but I have to go in here and talk to developers about that. I have to go in here to talk about production support and event monitoring, kind of knock conversations about that. So my design is basically involving all of the other conversations as I get my SDP. But now I got a service design package finally done through this feedback loop. Let's go and start working on it, whether I build it or partially buy it or fully buy it. I'm doing this. Oh, let me do an agile review. Okay, let me come back here and show you what I'm thinking. Get some feedback. Okay, whoa, that changes things. Let me do this some more. Let me come back out here. I keep doing this, right? And if there's somebody asks for a completely different scope change, well, let me come back up here. If not, we keep doing this. Now we finally get agreement that this is now built according to minimum viable product. I can then transition this into production, and now it's available. What I just went through was strategy, design, transition. Now it's in production operating, available. Now, I'm not done the story yet, but that's the traditional ITIL value stream. And I went through multiple loops to do that. So that's one value stream, from available, from concept to available. And I went through multiple feedback loops to get there. That's why this value chain is different than a manufacturing one. Now, the next value stream, can I have another one, please? Well, okay. I can either talk to somebody and have it delivered, or go to a catalog on the engaged conversation, hit the buy me now button. I go straight to deliver and then come back out and say, do you have it? Or the next value stream, I need help. It's broken. Come into the service desk, come straight to deliver, support, improve. Oh, I need to get a new design for a patch. Is that going to work? So I design, build the patch. I transition it. Let me come back out. Is that working for you now? And so there's multiple value streams through this value chain. From concept to available was the project value stream. But this value chain supports multiple value streams through it, right? And some people have primary activity in the different boxes, but some people are in all the boxes. The service product owner is engaged in every single one of them because they're engaged in service continuity planning. They're engaged in service design dialogues. They're engaged in feedback loops with review cycles. They're engaged with production support issues and problem management and event management conversations. All of that's going to feed improve in this conversation. It says I can improve any one of these activities as a means of the factory, or I can improve the product or service, right? And so this is a much more fluid approach to understanding what a service operations factory is. I resist the use of the word operations because it's not just operations. This is a services factory, a service chain for services. And so this is a much stronger model to use to describe how people work. And the project isn't divorced from this. It's a fast flow vehicle that I assemble to go through all of those loops for the first time. And then I may use other loops like enhancement loops, which, you know, go into design, transition, deliver. So don't think of the project as a roller coaster through the value chain as opposed to at one point in it. It doesn't go just into transition. It brings me through the entire value chain. Does that make sense as I describe it?
Yeah, I think maybe I get this, but I think now I'm more confused about where product managers and service owners fit into that.
They are involved in every single box. There is not a box. This is why the practices are not connected to the boxes. They underpin it and support it. They're not involved in a single book anymore. Right? There is no one place for a product or service owner to live. They manage value streams through the value chain for their specific product and service.
Shinio, what are your thoughts? Does that make sense?
So how I understood is they both work as a team, and so it's not that this box will be done by him, and however still there needs to be like deliverable or responsibility defined, otherwise they cannot work.
Okay, so let's map that cross-functional product team to this discussion. I'm just looking for my diagrams. I can just lay it over top. Where did it go? What slide was it on? Okay, it's right around here. I'm going to take a screenshot. Go back to the value chain. Remember, a cross-functional product team is made up of constituent members from the different capability areas of an organization. That's why you assemble a project team which is multidisciplinary. There we go.
So in the product team, there are both product owner and service owner.
So again, this is about scale. The product team is product oriented because, as you can see, these are technology roles. And they will come from different components of this organization. The service owner, if it's more than one product, will be another person. if the service and product are synonymous, because the service owner and there's only one product, that could be the same. But I'd ask you to think about a role on top that basically, like the product owner of a Scrum team, is orchestrating all of these people in the product team. So the developers, they live mostly in the tester as well, in here, all right? But I've got a platform member from here. I've got an architecture member from here. I've got an information security risk group that lives mostly here. Production support person lives here. And so I assemble a full stack product team where this part is, yes, the software factory. But the product team is actually made up of a larger context in a DevOps world. Not a software development world, I confer. But in a DevOps world, this is a full stack team, it's a dev and ops team, which is the product team, which is a difference, totally a difference. And the cross-functional relationship is often supported by self-service platform as a service type of capabilities that are being delivered here and to here. But I don't have an art. I'd grab another little person icon and I would put it on top of here. And I'm gonna do that so that we can get this clear, right? You know what I'm gonna do though. I'm gonna grab one of these little guys and I'm gonna put them Sorry, I'm starting to lose my mind here in the day. Here we go, here we go. Boom. Product service owner. Product or service owner, product and service owner. That's okay. This is a product-based team. I would need possibly a service owner if there's multiple products in my service. Right? Is it the person doing double duty, one around the service outcome, one around the technology? Or is it two different people? That's a decision for you. But just like Toyota has a single product owner for the Camry line, regardless of the assembly, right? This is what's going on.
So going back to the framework that Shinya has built in Confluence as kind of our baseline, let me go back to that real quick.
Please go ahead. Does that make sense as I'm describing it, guys?
I think
not
so.
one
Yes.
point.
Well, it makes sense. The point is just that we try, I think, to map it to what we have.
Right.
The concept of the full stack product team, it does seems to conflict with Scrum teams.
It does, because Scrum is an application-centric model. DevOps is not. But Scrum is a methodology for working. So you can have Scrum used in software development, or you can have Scrum used in DevOps. Scrum is a method. The team construct is what you decide on. You're used to software development Scrum teams, which was the small box within the product team. It doesn't mean I can't work in a Scrum context as a method with a larger team. That's what projects are.
But then you're sharing team members across multiple Scrum teams, right?
You are. So
how does that work though? How do you set capacity? How do you have sprint links? How can you have impediments? I mean, that doesn't fit in my Scrum world.
Well, okay, let's go back. I could even give you worse problems. When that team is doing both planned and unplanned work, you have to get visibility into both on the Kanban board. You can only plan based on the capacity that team member has, removing unplanned work plus removing all meetings. Right? So their true capacity is remove unplanned, remove meeting time on the calendar, what's left. Now, the other side of it, a project team, you have database work to do, network work to do, infrastructure work to do. Who's doing that? Well, you have a project assembled for that. Right? So there's a whole team evolution I could get you into by showing you a couple of DevOps slides if you'd like. But I'm definitely moving you out of software development mindset into DevOps mindset. Can I go back to that for a second, guys?
Well, I mean, I would love to hear more about that, but I've got to be honest, I'm kind of at maximum saturation.
Right.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to absorb anymore.
So think about this.
If we change the subject like that.
Well, let me give you this metaphor. A family is not just your close blood. You've got cousins who are members of other families, right? And you even have a crazy aunt or uncle that drops in once in a while from audit. All of them can have a relationship to the product, but their cadence of involvement doesn't mean the same. And some of your cousins you talk to a lot on Skype through DIY self-service platforms. But there's an orientation around the product which is beyond the software team in a DevOps context. I know I'm adding another big thought for you, but this is the difference between agile software development and a DevOps mentality.
So using a DevOps mentality in this organization structure that Shinya's built here, maybe there would be another row right below PO, right here somewhere, that said SO.
Yeah, so let me do one more thing. I'm sorry I keep throwing things at you guys, but I need to. Okay,
it's okay.
I'm going to show you a visual. This is a Spotify visual. Okay, just let me pick it up. I'm almost there. You can see this in the Spotify engineering video if you want. But I'm going to show you this to you. Okay, so here is an example of Spotify's cross-functional team. Don't look at the whole diagram, that'll blow your mind. All right, I want you to just look at the bottom part. All right, so they moved from a monolithic architecture to a microservices architecture. And they have loosely coupled architecture teams using shared things. And so they've got infrastructure squads and client app squads and feature squads. But these are all cross-functional teams that all collectively work on the product called Spotify. And they work as a system of teams, right? And they have to work together on projects. So teams within teams, and certain members of these teams work directly with these other teams. And so this is infrastructure services and integration services. And so this concept isn't just the software side, which you see over here. Because a product is not the application isolation, it's also the system. And I know I'm describing something out of experience for a pure software development, but they get into whole matrix discussions about how teams integrate with teams and tribes and such a chapters. I won't go there because I'm talking way beyond software development. That's only one thing.
I have a proposal, Doug. So instead of trying to assign service owner for each of those teams, why not come up with the service lines first, then try to map product owner or teams there? I think that's more meaningful from services perspective. Because if we map service owner to existing teams, there can be the case that we want to have some service line, however, the team is not existing. Does that make sense?
I think so. Could you draw it out somehow? Like, can you put it in paint and show me what your thoughts are on that? Maybe I don't completely understand what you're trying to say. I think I understand, but maybe you can sketch it out for me.
So do we have executives or senior leaders, I heard them say, that own outcomes? It sounds like you are closer to that. And then do we have product owners, and then with those, and then where are we missing the person that basically would be responsible to the category owner when they don't have the time and energy to care and feed a given service that has maybe, say, 6 products in it, like Acronis and Sophos and DYN DNS, because those are products.
So are you saying that maybe like the Scarabs team would be mapped to a service line in the service planning and integration team?
No, you're mixing metaphors again. Sorry,
No,
I'm
no.
getting tired, Doug. It's been 6 hours. I mean, it's been
That's what
over.
Shinya was suggesting mapping a line, a service line. I wasn't wondering if that's what his thoughts were.
If I'm mistaken, I would call Shinya the service line owner. You said all of those teams reported to him.
You.
Let me show you this. I'm not sure.
Does that make sense, Doug, as I describe it that way?
So I think Shinya's sketching something out here.
Yeah. So, for example, whatever services you create, Doug, or you define.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, there are services, and for all the services, there should be service owners, not SO. But for product owner side, it could be a service which do not have our development teams involved. So that's why I said, let's try to come up with the services we want to offer to customer. Then how teams could be related to those. That was what I was trying to say. Does this make sense?
And the other thing that you see here is that you could have one person and be the product owner of several products.
Yeah.
Right. The same with service, as long as the scale doesn't get too big.
Right. Or opposite, that you have a service owner and maybe multiple product owners.
Some of them internal, some of them externally integrated.
Yeah.
Like this.
Yeah, it makes sense, Shinya.
And then you'd have a person at the top of this, above the service names, which would be your service line owner.
Right.
Because that's an executive or senior director or senior, whatever role that is in your organization, that owns a family or category of services.
What do you think, Kaz?
Yeah. Well, conceptually, I agree. But so the lacking the resources as your points. So yeah, we need to some area to be sharing by dedicated person.
Right.
Yeah. Otherwise, we cannot. Yeah. Resolve. Yeah. This image. Yeah. Thanks.
Fine. Yeah, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
It's about size and scale, folks. It just, when she has a hat on for service owner, she's doing one thing. And then she needs to also think technically for how I'm going to do Sophos.
Right. Well, it is 3:30 my time, 6:30 Troy's time, and I know it's getting late in Germany.
Wait,
Close to midnight.
midnight, something like that. Yes.
Yep.
Anything else that's pressing for this call?
We didn't run out of things to talk about.
No, not at all. Troy, it's been fantastic. I've learned a ton. I'll share this with everybody on the call, the various recordings. Personally, I'm going to watch them several times over. I didn't catch everything that we talked about the first go round, but it's been fantastic for me. Any feedback or comments from the rest of the team?
Well, I like it very much. Again, it's close to midnight. Not a bit tired, fully awake. You catch me with these topics.
Time for a recreational beverage.
Yeah. And
therefore,
yeah, because I think that that brings us further, right? So this is exactly where we struggle a bit, and yeah, I think we are every help is welcome here that helps us to improve.
Yeah.
Back to that, to the last slide, what you just showed. Should we try that internally with our service? I think as action items from this meeting.
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think it brings us closer, right? So probably ought to have some deeper discussion, Shinya and Kaz, about whether that's the right model. But I think it's, I think it brings us a little closer to some of our thoughts and ideas and how we could share resources and still accomplish all the roles and responsibilities of service ownership and product ownership and management.
Yeah, the word role is a good word here. You don't need a dedicated person for everything we've talked about.
Yeah.
But then you have to think about size and scale.
Yeah.
So what schedule will be like within this month?
Let's meet. Let's plan on meeting next week if you've got availability.
Yeah.
But we can do that. We can do that offline. I know
Yeah.
it's getting late. Being engaged and Troy, thanks for hanging out with us. It's been really helpful. John, glad you could join, and Cause, enjoy working from home.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a delight, guys. I enjoy talking about this stuff, as you probably can tell.
Yes, you're very passionate about it. Good.
And if I can help in any way, I would welcome it, of course.
You got it. No, it's been great. Okay, be safe, everybody. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.